And we are live on Energy Superheroes with Nabeel Mahmood. And he's calling in today from Fresno, California. He is a nomad futurist. He's going to tell us what that means. He's a podcast host. He's also started a foundation, which has become an NGO with a focus on women and minorities around the world. Some really exciting stuff and big in sustainability as well. Nabeel, it's a pleasure to have you on Energy Superheroes today.
Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Good stuff. So when I heard nomad futurist, you got to tell me more about what that means. That is a cool phrase that I haven't heard.
It really started by the fact that we live in a global economy and the fact that we should be able to work from anywhere and anytime. We talked about as technologists, we've talked about the ability to be remote. We've talked about a global economy, but we have never really practiced it. I took that on personally because of a couple of life-changing events. I've only died a couple of times, and we can talk about it as we progress, whereby I had needed to leave California. I needed to leave the rat race. I needed to move away, and I wanted to be on an island. And the only way I could have done that was because of the world that I live in. And that's the technology world. Hence the reason why being a nomad.
Oh, interesting. So when you say you died a couple of times, you'll have to tell me more about that. That sounds inspirational and it inspires curiosity at the same time.
So 18 and a half, I was paralyzed from waist down for 9 months. Used to play cricket and polo. Fell off the horse, broke my left leg, compound fracture. L1 through L3 were infused. Couldn't move. I was told I could never walk. Mind over matter. Convinced myself that I was going to get out of it. Didn't want to be on crutches. Wanted to be on my feet. Did that. Moved to America. Got involved in the rat race of the corporate culture and totally lost my voice. I was following the American dream, the white picket fence, the dogs, and living on a golf course and fancy cars and all of that fun stuff. And 6.5 years ago, I was able to achieve I was able to achieve everything that I wanted. That corner office that we have so dreamt for, the power of managing people and being a part of a large company. Yes, it was there, but I was not really happy. I felt like going to prison every day and ended up with a couple of heart attacks. I was flatlined. I was dead for 4 minutes and 19 seconds. At that point in time, I said I need to make some major life-changing decisions and hence packed my bags and moved to Hawaii. And that's where I really started to discover myself, who my identity was and who I am as an individual. And then life had been great. And in discovering so, I felt that I needed to actually embrace my voice. I needed to be who I am and share my message and vision and tell people the way things are versus sugarcoating it. Because that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what the culture teaches us. Don't say the wrong thing. It might offend somebody. I've learned to tell it the way that might be painful today, but in the long term, it won't be. Anyhow, long or short was, I was actually playing in a tennis tournament in New Jersey, June of last year, and ended up with a cardiac arrest, resulted in another heart attack, and walked away with a quadruple bypass. So this is me 9 months after with a new titanium sternum and all fully renovated heart and valves. Gone through the medical changes and some serious trauma in my life, medically, physically, emotionally. I figured that I've got both my legs in the grave and I've got to leave a legacy. I've got to do it for somebody else. I've got to help change the world. And in order to change the world, I've got to change myself. I've got to change my approach. I've got to change the way I've grown up in with society and what society has taught us. And that was the birth of Nomad Futurist. We are going to tell you what's going on in the world. And we want to break the barriers, right? These fake personas that we have of people that we aren't as executives in this industry, they need to be broken. You know what? I grew up with a mom and dad and in a culture that a man is supposed to be strong. You can't have tears in your eyes. That's what I grew up with. You've got to stay strong. When you're managing a large enterprise, you've got to stay strong. You've got to believe in yourself. You've got to create this image of strength and power. You know what? I'd rather be vulnerable. I'd rather tell people the way I feel because then they can see it through me. They can see it through my eyes and they'll believe.
Incredible. Yeah. We hear a lot about this word vulnerability, and you had to, as you say, die a couple of times to get to that point. How do you get to be vulnerable without having to die a couple of times? What is that mental journey like to get to that place where you can be vulnerable?
Can't really speak to it because I've not experienced it. I believe if I didn't have these life-changing experiences, I would still have lost my voice and I'll still be a part of that rat race. In my scenario, it was these life-changing events that defined me and made me the man I am today. Otherwise, I would be still doing the same thing, unfortunately.
I think that's super honest for you to say that because it is difficult for people to have to go through the hardship and the changes. Nobody really wants to go through it. But in the end, to be able to say that you come out better on the other side is a really amazing thing. Let me transition. When I heard that you were a podcast host, a lot of people asked me, how do you become a podcast host? And we're pretty new here, but you've been doing it a while now. Would love to hear just walk through the journey of how you came up with the idea and then how you go through it and keep your listeners engaged and grow your audience.
So I'm not a podcaster by profession. I don't even know if that actually is a profession. However, growing up as a kid, drama, theater were something that I was very interested in, not something that I actually wanted to pursue. I was an asked two different directions, but it was something that was very exciting growing up. Anyhow, when I ended up into the practical life of being a professional, it helped, whereby I was able to get in front of the audience and speak and convey and get my message across. As a part of my job, it's been public speaking has been a significant part of my job. And it's been very technical over the years. Like we talk about technical stuff like, oh, we've got this API or we've got this new technology. It's all fun and dandy, but they're all rehearsed. And being on the circuit for 20 years of my career, I started realizing that it's just all old people. I would go to about 35, 40 conferences a year and speak at these events. And all what I would see is the age gap getting bigger and bigger. I did not see very many younger generation or people out there. And in talking to one of my close friends, Bill Koblenz, we were sitting at a conference in Hawaii. We just got done speaking at this conference and we were having a fight. And it came about that there aren't very many young people in this industry. At every event that we went to the year before, the average age was mid 40s. Where's all the young people? Where's all the young talent? And we are ready to hand off the batons to the younger generation. They're not even here. So we just jokingly said, let's start a podcast. Let's just try to demystify technology, make it easier. Let's just voice our opinion and let it not be about technology. Let it be about trials and tribulations, how great this industry is and what this industry is about. So it was really born as a pilot project 2.5 years ago. And how or why we've been successful is because we've been very transparent. The imperfection has been the perfection for us. So if you hear the dogs barking and the cows meowing and the children screaming in the background, there's no Hollywood redoing or Hollywood effects of making that sound very exotic. It's real. That's helped us. Plus, we've made it a very clear point that our platform is commercial free. So it doesn't matter who you are and how big of a company you work for. We want to learn about you. It's about you, your trials and tribulations, your journey to becoming who you are, as well as how do you learn on a daily basis. The industry that we are in is evolving. It evolves by the minute. So how do you keep up? And what I found out is that a lot of these folks, a lot of these executives in the space end up being very vulnerable. And people that I've known for decades, I've learned things about them on our platform that I would not have otherwise.
That was very cool. Where do you distribute your podcast? I think a lot of people like to know that. They'll record it and then distribute it to certain platforms. What has worked for you?
So we distribute it pretty much on every platform. We've got our own website, nomadfutures.com is our platform for news, for any press releases, for pretty much audio content for now. It's also available on the likes of Spotify and Google and Apple and any other platform that there is. So we are fairly, very open. We made sure that's available in every country. So as of right now, we're in about 69 countries and roughly about 250,000 plus subscribers.
Oh, that's incredible. And so in 2 years, that's a really rapid growth. Do you think that the international markets has been a big factor in contributing to that growth, or is it mostly in the US?
International market has been a big factor. I think the US market for us is roughly about 54, 55%. The remainder of it is actually really international. And it's emerging and fiduciary markets. That's interesting. You've got the markets like South Africa, for instance. You've got markets in in Asia that I would have never thought that anybody would be interested in listening to what we have to say. But it's cool because it validates that technology is going to those markets. Africa is the last connect, in my opinion. And guess what? Those people are not going to make the mistakes that we have over the last 4 decades of computing in America.
That's amazing. And you bring up technology, and I started in digital marketing, digital media, that segment in the late 90s with the dot-com era. And then I transitioned into the energy industry in 2009. And I've noticed over time, more and more technology is applying to energy and sustainability. Could you comment on that trend of the movement of technology towards climate, energy, sustainability?
Yeah. So in the data center world, we are energy hogs. At least that's what we have been told. And there is a reason for that, primarily because of the fact that a lot of the design that we are still practicing are about 4 decades old. The mindset is that old. The younger generation has not come into the space to question the way we have built these environments before. The mindset that we've had in a typical build out would be, let's build a massive infrastructure, let's build a massive building, and they will come, right? Computing would come. Well, that needs to be changed. It needs to be more modular, it needs to be more sustainable, it needs to be more scalable. And we don't need to build these massive infrastructures. So that's become a challenge. As I look into the future, I believe that globally speaking, 30% or so of the energy over the next 5 years is probably going to be computing. And a part of the issue is that there's a lot of stranded power. There's a lot of wasted energy. We have over-designed these infrastructures. They're under-provisioned, underutilized, and we're wasting a lot of energy.
Yeah. So how do we overcome that? And who do you see leading the way in that regard? Have you seen some certain either nations or companies that are really stepping forward to change that?
How do we overcome that is, for starters, creating this awareness that this is an issue and it's going to be a bigger issue if we don't take care of it today. Foundationally, we need to change our thinking and how we design, build, and support these environments. And that comes through education. Secondly, uh, the technology platforms need to change as well. The initiatives that we currently have, whether it be EPA or any other body in America or any other country for that matter, the monetary element needs to be addressed. So right now, I was actually on a call earlier about carbon emissions and utilization metrics. And they're like, let's just throw some money at it. They do it right, we'll give them yeah. They're going to band-aid it. They're going to put a band-aid on it, fix it. Our numbers are all great because we have fluffed something up. Okay, I apologize if I offend somebody. But at the end of the day, the culture whereby we constantly put band-aids on things needs to change. We need to get down to the root. We need to get to the foundation of where the problem exists. And how would you feel if I say, instead of me giving you an incentive, we're going to fine you? But at the end of the day, I think what's most important out of all of it is that we need to have a standards body that needs to define the standards and set up the right expectations, whether it be a public and or a government body. But these environments and infrastructures need to be audited on a regular basis, whether it be a data center or a supplier to a data center or anybody that's in the manufacturing business. Standards need to be practiced and developed on a global basis. That's the starting point.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And who do you think is the best body to do that? And how do we make it happen functionally?
In my world, I would say ISO, for instance, could be a good starting point. TIA could be another good starting point. As long as they are accredited institutions, I'm good with it. I can't expect something from Joe down the street to come up with a standard because he has got nothing to hold up to. But TIA and ISO are two standards that I speak very highly of and very fond of.
That makes sense. Let's transition a little bit to your foundation work. You mentioned that you have a foundation. And I think a lot of people in the audience would be curious to know about how do you set up a foundation? How do you get that off the ground? I talk to business executives all the time that want to make a difference and want to get into the nonprofit world. How do you go about that?
It's actually in America, it's quite an extensive process. Oh my gosh, it's like pulling teeth and rabbits out of the hat. Fortunate that we had good help, good legal counsel to help set that up. There's a lot of tools available. You can go to LegalZoom, My Company Works, or whatever. I think there's plenty of platforms available that you can set it up. But be very mindful that you've got to be able to follow the process throughout a lot of forms. For us to get a 501(c)(3) process was roughly about a 6-month long process. And that was engaging the right people to do the right thing and follow the right process. Believe me, if I would have tried to do it on my own using any of these tools that are available online, I would have been lost in the amount of forms that you've got to fill out. So I would say and highly suggest seek good legal counsel, good accountants, and let them do the work. It might cost a little bit, but it's absolutely worth it.
And so, how long has your foundation been operating? And tell us about where you're focused.
We got our 501(c)(3) status in December of last year, end of December, early January. So it's been roughly about 4.5, 5 months. We have been working on developing programs, and we are, as a matter of fact, just starting awareness to raise funds. Our core focus is education, education for minorities, education for women, with a keen focus in underserved, underdeveloped regions around the world, especially in emerging markets. I want to make sure that we are able to provide tools and education to kids in areas and give them an opportunity. And it's also about exposure and experiences. I give people an example of Tiger Woods. I'm not sure how many people are golfers, but if you've got a following face of executives, the example is that Tiger Woods is a legend. He's a legend because he's focused. He's a legend because his father did not take him to a Sears candy store and said, "You've got 24 options, choose one from. And oh, by the way, go play all of the sport." They were very selective in what he was exposed to. And he picked a sport, he found his passion, and he worked his tail off. And he is Tiger Woods. So the same concept applies over here. STEM is very wide. So it's great. We need that. However, I'm a firm believer in narrowing that down to a focus. And in our scenario, we want to expose kids to these professions, whether it be electrical, mechanical, structural, networking, coding, whatever the case might be. But we want to have them identify what they're passionate about and start narrowing that focus so we can build on their skill set. That's really what our foundation is about, to get them close to what they're passionate about. See, I'm a great example. I fell into technology purely by an accident. I would have never thought that I would be a technologist or a futurist. I was supposed to be an athlete. I was supposed to be running the field and signing autographs right now. And here we are, we're talking about bits and bytes. So again, right bit had a good basis of education, but didn't go to school to become an electrical mechanical engineer. I could do all of that. I probably do it better than most, but that's not what my core was. So it really comes down to is exposure, education.
Gotcha. So, have you guys developed a process to take those students through in order to get them down to where they can find out what is the specific area within technology that they're ideally suited for?
Yeah, so we are working on that. We are currently working with Northern Virginia Community College and Institute of Technology. There's a few other programs that we are engaged in and doing some trials. We recently hosted about 50 kids in Austin, Texas. We brought kids from high school and college. As a matter of fact, we took a very different approach whereby we've got all these sub verticals within our industry, from legal to real estate to architects to engineers. And I turned the tables around and have the kids question all of these professionals as to why they're doing what they're doing and what do they like or hate about it. And that was a very good starting point to give them an opportunity to start asking questions. And that's probably one of the ways that they're going to be able to figure out what do they want to be when they grow up. Like one of those things, like my dad was a great example and a major influence on me without being a major influence on me, because he would do things. He would go places and he would talk to somebody in certain way, tone, and he would say certain things. And those were life lessons. Those were exposures that I got and experiences that I got exposed to at a very early age. And then they sat deep in my roots. And looking back at it now, I was getting all of this education without getting education. And I was asking all these questions without asking all these questions because of this exposure that I got. As if we can narrow that down and make it more full to the kids where they can start asking questions and be a little bit more curious, then I think we can shorten that life cycle and they can get an early start.
No, incredible. Systematizing that process of it's almost like mentorship and allowing the kids to find a vocation at the right age so they don't just wander around. I think a lot of kids now, They don't even want to go to college because they think they're going to take on a bunch of debt and they're not going to learn anything that's meaningful. And we, as the older generation, will criticize the kids, but the kids are smart and they're very practical and they can see what that they don't know necessarily what they should do, but they can see what they should not do real quick. And so there is a crisis, I think, within higher education, both in terms of the cost and in terms of the relevance to what you can bring to the world today. So I think you're tapping into that trend, which is super admirable. How can companies, because we have a lot of, let's say, both startup companies and bigger companies, how can they plug into this and be able to hire the top talent? Because it's definitely a gap right now where people can't hire the people that they want, particularly in these STEM fields.
So it goes back to foundation we need to change. I believe one of the challenges that we've got in the time that we live in is that we are very reliant on technology. We have lost that human intelligence. In talking to a lot of my peers that are involved in human resources or staff augmentation or hiring people, it's amazing to learn that they rely, which is actually good for us in a way, and they rely on these platforms that are fully automated. So you might be the right person, with the right qualifications, but you're not an SEO expert. So when you fill in your application, the computer, now, if you don't fit it, you're out. Whereas in the old days, somebody would pick up the phone and have a quick conversation with you. They might call and say, Peter, come on in. Let's have a face to face. How do we fix that? I think the human intelligence is as important, if not more, than artificial intelligence. And
Yeah.
just for your users and listeners, I would say there's nothing artificial about artificial intelligence. It's only actionable intelligence. Computers are not smarter than us. They will never be smarter than us. Remember that, Elon Musk.
100% agree. And that's one of the beautiful things, I think, of this new interaction where we're on Zoom and Teams and these other areas, because I think prior to that, you're right, the web was text based. And you mentioned SEO. People could game the system by putting in certain keywords here and there. But then when you'd actually get in front of them and talk to them, you find out that they really don't know what they're. And so I think now these meeting platforms have allowed us to connect on a more human level. It's not as human as face to face in person, but it's a lot more than email and over the computer. So it is a nice, I think, outcome maybe of the pandemic of everybody getting on these platforms makes it easier to connect. Tell me about somebody that you've connected with over these kind of platforms that surprised you and what kind of an impact it had on you, whether it was through your podcast or another way. You never met them in person, but it was like, wow, you had a big impact through meeting them.
Oh my gosh, you have just put me on the spot here. I would say Dave Temkin, the CIO for Netflix.
Wow. Very cool. And
Yeah.
was it through the podcast or was it another type of meeting?
Actually, the introduction was made to the podcast, and I was told that that's a gentleman that I need to actually have a conversation with and have him on the podcast. As a matter of fact, you know what? No, I would say Vincent Cerf would be the gentleman that was incredible experience. And not that I'm putting Dave Temkin down now, but I just remembered Vincent Cerf is the father of internet. And he came to our platform. He was recommended by somebody. He's a man that I would like to actually meet in person now. We have had several conversations on the virtual environments, and what an incredible person and what he has done for computing, what he's done for networking, and just what he's done for humanity. An incredible person.
Yeah, and I think so. Those kind of interactions, to me, what makes being a host so incredible is that you get to meet these people that you never thought that you would have been able to meet. So I want to go back to this whole idea of podcast and talk about. So we met over LinkedIn, I believe, and we scheduled this call. What are you seeing in terms of LinkedIn? I see a lot of guys on LinkedIn that, let's say, 5 years ago, LinkedIn was just like basically a resume without a lot of interaction. But all of a sudden, from where I sit, seeing the platform grow. What have you seen on that or other platforms that you're excited about?
LinkedIn certainly has grown over the last few years. I think a lot of good stuff's come out of it for the last 2 years, especially, but it's also concerning. It's getting very sales heavy. People talk about the number of impressions they get on a post or the number of connections that they have and all these bragging rights. So it's a little frustrating from that perspective. It's been good for me because I take the time to read up on someone's profile And if I've met you, I'll connect with you. If I haven't, then I want to learn about you before I actually get to my network. So it's how you really manage it. There's good and bad to everything. It's how you manage it. I'm not going to know 100,000 people. There's no possible way. My close knit group is probably going to be 10 people. My circle of friends is going to be maybe 20 people. My circle of acquaintances may be 1,000 or so. And everybody else is just noise, and it's difficult to keep up with it. You got to be very careful and not have the fear of missing out, and you're not getting enough impressions, and people are looking at it, they're not liking stuff. That can be a little nerve wracking. So use it to what this platform was designed for, in my opinion, and that's really about networking. And don't use it as an overselling platform. Actually, got a call from a financial advisor today. Well, I found you on LinkedIn. Do you want to buy services from me? No, I really don't. So there's pros and cons. I like the platform. I think it's, from a professional networking perspective, it's the best tool available out there. And it's actually, back in the day, they used to say something around the lines of 6 degrees of separation. Now it's less than a half a degree of separation. You can find out about people very quickly.
It is incredible. So you mentioned your inner circle. I got to touch on that. How do you decide who's in your inner circle and what are you looking for? Is it people that have you known a long time, or what do you look for in your inner circle?
Yeah, primarily people that I've actually met. I am still the old school, even though this is what we do for a living. Still the old school. I want to shake your hands, look in your eyes. I want to see how real you are. Are you full of it, or can I trust you? And conversations we're going to have virtually or physically, being present in front of each other, are they going to be the same? Is the experience going to be the same? There's a lot of trust in getting into that inner circle.
No, for sure. And one thing I hear from a lot of our listeners are in venture capital or their companies starting up. And a lot of times they have to tap into their network in order to either raise funds or take a business to the next level. Have you ever worked with your network on investments or other types of business together, or do you keep that network on purely a friends level?
No, I have. And yeah, making an investment, you've got to know people. I would tell you this, if an opportunity comes up, it might be the next Facebook or Twitter or Tesla. If somebody tries to sell me that on a virtual environment, it will be a hard no.
Yeah,
Hard no for my network as well.
it's very difficult.
Yeah. I know over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of capital that's been spent. It's high risk. Now, of course, you've got to do your due diligence, but I want to shake your hands. I want to look right in your eyes. I want to hear your voice. I want to hear the peaks and valleys in your voice. I want to hear the stutter. I want to see the level of confidence that you've got, that belief that you've got in yourself.
Yeah. So you had mentioned Africa when we previously talked, and this is an exciting area of investments, which is why I'm transitioning there. I'm seeing more and more activity and buzz around investing in Africa, both in terms of sustainability and projects and a little bit on the venture side. Could you talk to what you're seeing in Africa and opportunities you see there?
Absolutely. So Africa is a lost connect. That's when the world is connected. That's when we've got the internet bubble. That's the future. I call it the golden sparrow, the gold rush, whatever you want to say. That's where things are going to change. It's the last frontier, whatever you want to call it. That's the land of opportunities, I believe. Why? Because nothing has been done, and they're not going to make the same mistakes that we have over the last 4 decades of computing or industrialization in countries like America. They will have had the opportunity of leadership from primary markets like us, and they're going to do it right. They're going to do it right the first time.
Why do you think that sounds extremely hopeful? And what is it about the is it the culture? Is it the mentality? Why do you think they're going to why do you think they're going to do it the right way?
Primarily, a lot of those investments are coming in from markets like us. So we've been thoughtful and careful, and we've made all those mistakes, and we've lost a lot of money. So we're going to be thoughtful and careful. Of course, there's bureaucracy and politics and corruption and whatnot. It's going to hold things back, and we might suffer a little bit. But as far as designing, building, implementing technologies, we're not going to make the same mistake that we have. From a sustainability perspective, if you're doing brick and mortar buildings, you probably might do tilt ups with green material. For instance, I was reading about wind power the other day. So there's a way about changing the turbine. that they don't look ugly. They're not noisy as we've got in the US or primary markets. There is a better way of doing that. There's better technology to do that. That is really referring to the fact that the technology and platforms that we've got in place, they're not going to have to go and suffer through that.
No, for sure. And you also mentioned wanting to give people an incentive to stay in their markets as opposed to migrating into the primary markets. And that's part of the goal of your NGO. Talk more to that.
Yeah, I'm an immigrant to America. Again, ran away from home and came to America. Had no idea what I was going to do out here, other than be in movies or be a sports agent like Jerry Maguire. That never worked for me because I had zero interest in American football or baseball. Never got the sports, and I couldn't sell anybody on something that I didn't believe in. You can't really have, what do we call it, World Series when you don't play against anybody else. Anyhow, that was me being funny. But yeah, I think if I had the opportunity to be where I grew up and be able to do what I'm doing today, considering if it was nice and warm and tropical as well, that would have helped. But if I had the opportunity to end up living where I was, I would have been able to give back the economy that was a part of me or the culture that was part of me. We all moved to America or we moved to UK or primary markets because it's an opportunity to make more money or have a better quality of life, which is great. And being an immigrant to America, of course, I welcome everybody out there and I would, but why can't we do that locally? Why can't people stay and grow their economies locally and support their economies and do something better for they should all travel, but they should be able to do something better for themselves and their countries. So that's really the goal. And how do we go about that is by creating and giving them an opportunity, education, experiences and exposure and supporting what all of us have been doing, but at a much bigger scale.
Yeah. So you mentioned Jerry Maguire. I got to throw out the show me the money phrase, right? So
Yep.
in those kind of markets, I think the show me the money is going to be a big part of it. How do we encourage investors to come into those markets and to invest locally and then not just take the returns right out of the market back to their home markets, but reinvest it then locally?
If you think short term, you're going to have short term gains. Play the long game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Bitcoin is a great example. Those that actually played the short game cashed out selling all of their Bitcoins for a pizza. Those that didn't are billionaires today.
That's a great example. So I always think there's got to be some other type of capitalism in order to get people to think about this long game. There has to be some sort of hybrid system. I'll plug our local supermarket here is a company called Publix, would encourage the whole audience to look into it. But they're a private company, but they're the largest by revenue company in the state of Florida, and all their employees are shareholders. And so the decisions they've made in staving off Walmart and some of the other big players that have come in have been successful. And the community's invested in the company. The employees are invested in the company. And it's been a model that's allowed them to keep the money locally, both in the state and in the local community. And I just feel there's got to be some sort of third way of economic system that leverages the benefits of the incentive structure of capitalism, which is, of course, the greatest in the world, but then also allows people and encourages people to take this longer term view so that we can have money stay locally in these communities as opposed to being all the returns going to these absentee shareholders.
Yeah, the best way to do that is engage people, local, hire local. That's where hopefully we can get to that point in time and let them invest locally.
Absolutely.
You start pulling the money out, that's when the challenge begins. Look at what the British did to India and Pakistan in the 1940s. They started extracting all the minerals. They started extracting all the gold. That's what killed their economy. And they have been struggling ever since. Not that I'm actually putting the monarchy here at question, but all the colonies suffer because putting that in perspective is capitalist. They extract.
Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, and it makes total sense because throughout history, whoever had the power was able to extract the resources. But we've come to this connected place in the world now. We're all looking around and thinking, how can we do right by everybody? Because I think people are thinking more about this long game that you mentioned. So to that end, have you read any books lately or been influenced by anybody that's helped shape your thinking around this, all that you're doing, because it's a tremendous amount of activity.
Yeah. So the most recent book I read was Three Cups of Tea.
Okay. I haven't read it. Can't say I've read it. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So this gentleman actually, he's a pharmacist out in America, not to give it all away, but he decides to go and climb Mount Everest. And he misses it the first time, misses the second time, and then somebody saves his life. People that had absolutely nothing gave everything away to make sure that he gets an opportunity to live another day. And he starts this foundation, and he's promoting education in the Himalayas. And through that process, one thing that I learned was 1 cup of tea, you're an acquaintance. 2 cups of tea, you're a friend. 3 cups of tea, you're a family. And you do anything for your family.
Wow. And yeah, the mentality of the people over there is so different. As you mentioned, 3 cups of tea. And I think on the happiness index, it's one of the happiest people in the world as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Less is more. I've become a nomad over the last 6 years. I've changed a lot in my life. I was a suit and tie guy with high cut hair like yours to now looking like I probably might be on the streets of San Francisco, but less has actually become more. It's a much better state of mind, and you're happy. At least I'm happy. Being a nomad, I'm happy with not having to worry about things. And that comes with being able to give back. And I'll leave it with this. So when I was actually on the operating table, being cut open, right before I was being cut open, I was very peaceful. And the only thing that struck me was that if I come out of this, that will be because of something that I've done for something and for someone. And hopefully someone's praying there. I'm not religious by any means, but that did occur. That thought did occur, that hopefully I've done something good for somebody, that I'm in their thoughts and prayers. After I came out of the surgery, I was on life support for 48 hours, not knowing if I was going to be able to make the cut. But you know what? Looking back at it, if you do the right thing, things are going to happen to you. It's karma.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And that's one of the things we all share in common, right? Is that we're all going to face that moment at some point in our lives where we have to look at, am I going to stay here on this side, or am I going to the other side, wherever that might be?
Exactly. Yeah.
Not to put you on the spot, but where do you think that is?
Oh my gosh. Everybody asks me that question. I've not seen the bright lights yet or anything. It's total darkness, but it's very peaceful, at least for me.
Absolutely. And I think peace is what we're all looking for, is whether we're working really hard in our industry to try and make money, or we're doing a nonprofit, or we're doing a podcast, all the things that you're doing. I think everybody does want that peace in their lives.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think the last thing I'd like to ask you is, to that end, around peace, is what advice could you give the audience, whether they're taking a path similar to yours or staying on the corporate track? How do you get that peace on a day-to-day basis?
But live life like there's no tomorrow. And if tomorrow comes, live again. That'll be the advice.
Unbelievable. I think that's great advice. Nabeel Mahmood calling us in today from Fresno, Colorado. He's a nomad futurist, but I don't think that phrase captures everything that he's involved in. He's got a foundation, a podcast, and involved helping women and minorities around the world. Nabeel, it's been a pleasure having you. How can the audience get in touch with you?
Quite simple. Nomadfuturist.org is our foundation. You can find me on LinkedIn at Nabeel Mahmood. That's my Twitter handle as well. Nabeel Mahmood. But please make sure no salespeople.
No sales pitches. If you're gonna reach out, you better have something interesting to say as far as adding value. And I'm sure that maybe you're looking for interesting guests for your podcast. We'd love to have you back on anytime, and we appreciate you being here. Thanks, Nabeel.
Oh, thank you very much, Peter. Appreciate it.
All right.
Okay. Hopefully it was fun.